Welcome.
Good to see you.
How do you determine the appropriate size of a museum?
You look at several things. First of all, you look at the visitation you might expect. There's a certain number that your Smithsonian will always get. You also look at the stories you want to tell, how many exhibitions you need to tell. You want to look at whether or not you have on-site storage or off-site storage. So you look at a variety of factors. You also look at what the site allows you to do. And what we've discovered is to be able to do a building that serves the public, also protects the staff and gets the right amount of staff, it's about 350,000 square feet. That's sort of industry standards here at the Smithsonian.
So what are the major challenges presented by creating a new museum, and what are the major benefits of creating a new museum?
You got 3 hours? I think that there are many challenges. Obviously, the challenge of balancing new with old, right, to making sure that we're taking care of the entire Smithsonian. It's crucially important to realize that we've got to build a strong fundraising apparatus from the very beginning so that we can make sure the resources that are there from the private sector. It's also essential to build a strong staff. And then most of these museums, like the African American Museum, will have to build collections. So to think about what are the variety of strategies that allow you to find the stuff of history that people need to see. But maybe more than anything else, it's important to recognize how do these new museums find the right balance between tradition and innovation? What's the role of technology? Does that add additional burdens? Does that save us costs? So ultimately what you're really doing is on new museums, from the African American Museum on to anything new we build, what you're saying is it is no longer acceptable just to be something that serves audiences in Washington. So what are the ways you reach beyond that? So all of that are part of some of the challenges. One of the benefits is really that the history of America is so complicated that no one building can do it. But the Smithsonian has this amazing opportunity to create different portals into what it means to be an American. A portal that may go through the Air and Space Museum or the African American Museum. And what that does is means that even if you're thinking about you're only interested in technology, suddenly you can see connectivity because you're at the Smithsonian. That's something that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world.
So I wonder if you would reflect for a moment on the experience of the African American Museum, since you were the founding director of it. Specifically, if you would address the original points of skepticism that were leveled against the museum, and then how the experience since has responded to the original kinds of criticisms that were leveled against the idea.
Well, first, the notion was that this museum had been floating around for 100 years, so it would never happen. So part of the strategy was making the museum exist from the day I started, not waiting for a building, birthing the museum online, doing traveling exhibitions, and basically creating a space in the Museum of American History that now the other museums are building on. I think that was crucially important. I think one of the real challenges were that many of the smaller African American museums were very concerned that this would take away resources. But what has happened since then is the visibility of the museum, the excitement about African American culture, has led to increased visitation around the country, has led to more support from local governments for these kinds of institutions. I think the biggest challenge was to think, what does it mean to be a 21st century museum? What's the role of technology? What's the role of reaching out? And I think the museum sort of invented a lot of new things that we can build upon. So ultimately, the key for us was to think about how do you craft a museum? And the fundamental question I would ask is, how do you craft a museum on the mall that's part of the Smithsonian that serves a community but serves more than that community? That, I think, is one of the fundamental questions.
Well, I appreciate that, and I just want to tell you, a week doesn't go by when I'm not there, a day or two a week for different events. It's become such a spectacular asset, not just locally, but nationally. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Gentleman yield.